Welcome, everyone, to another Native Paranormal Crossroads. We are joined by the intrepid explorers of paranormal adventures, the Paranormal Rangers, John, Stan, and Michelle. I am Andrew, this is Laura, and today we are talking about meteorites and satellites. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of the Native Paranormal Crossroads. So, Jonathan, what do Native Americans or their indigenous cultures see when they see meteorites in the sky? What is their general cultural interpretation?
Well, for Navajo, they are uh, basically gods or holy people in vehicles, and they're often seen as something otherworldly. Um, we kind of lightly use the term meteorites, satellites in the title, but we are going to be discussing some cultural items that have to go along with that. This discussion actually started, and I'll let Michelle explain what happened, and we can go from there.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, it was a really interesting discussion that I had with Jonathan and Stan. Um, I was here in Utah and living here, and was acknowledged by my daughter-in-law that the sky was blowing up. She's from the Philippines, and I didn't understand what she was saying, and she says, "Go outside," and there was a projectiles of if Joel has those pictures, you can see some of those. In her mind, that was a meteorite. Um, and as you can see, I always check the big sky, what's going on in the NASA aspect, and went on their link and such. And on the news, it said that there was a satellite re-entering our atmosphere, but that can be mistaken for a satellite. I mean, excuse me, a meteorite. And it broke up once it hit the atmosphere, as you can see by these photos, and then just lit up the sky on a very, very clear, cloudless day. It was kind of exciting. The hearts were pumping, and that this event, you thought, wow, midday, here comes a satellite. And a few years back, I would say about 2016, a huge one showed up here in our Utah skies. And it was the size of a Volkswagen, and I wish I had taken that picture, but we followed it. And doing research on this particular event that happened in 2016, it ended up in Russia, and there's a lot of news coverage of that one landing in the Russian country. And it took out, it had a sound wave, the waves from that took out some buildings and an apartments, and just kind of cracked some windows and exploded some of things there, and it was felt. And so this one was pretty big, and we have these happening all the time. We just don't pay attention to them much. But it was on this particular day, my daughter-in-law caught those photos, which was really interesting. And she was in somewhat panic, had never seen anything like it, so she didn't know what was happening. So in our discussion with Stan and Jonathan is an investigator of these kind of phenomena, and he says that to me looks like a satellite entering the atmosphere. And so I called them up and asked him, how do you know? And he identifies some of the way, those other how meteorites look and versus projectiles coming from space. And when I did do my research, I found that Space X had lost had on regular basis right now are having sending up satellites, but they're also coming back and hitting our atmosphere. So those can be misidentified. Go ahead, Jonathan. Tell them what you told me about it, what you thought.
Well, if you think about it, we have thousands of satellites that are circling. Some are used for communications, Some of them are for our TVs. Some of them are military, and we're not allowed to know what they are or even what they look like. Um, some are designed to shoot down other satellites, and
Mm-hmm.
it's it's rather humorous sometimes. That now we even have a space force, so we're claiming to defend space. Um, and of course, a lot of them have cameras. I'm sure they're trying to figure out how to get a rail gun up there. Um, because we try to militarize everything that we can, because you never know. We need to protect ourselves against the aliens or something. So let's destroy ourselves first, so the aliens can never conquer us. Um, you know, who knows? But what I mentioned to Michele was that Native culture has a major incident that if you go back in history. Now, again, we have this idea of history being told by scientists, and I don't want to bash scientists, but sometimes in meaning well, they're short-sighted or they don't listen. We're told that our oral traditions are myth, that these are just fanciful stories that are made up so that uh, you have a story to tell. And, kind of like Shakespeare coming up with something. And in our native culture, we have a oral tradition, is what they call it. And everything that's said has to be said exactly. You can't mix and match. You can't embellish it. You can't leave things out. Um, and in some cases, like a ceremony, uh, the words have to be exactly right in the exact order, hundreds and hundreds of verses of a song. And if the medicine man doesn't get that right, um, the whole ceremony is no good. And people are paying a lot of money for these ceremonies. They could actually say, "I want my money back." So it's nothing to really laugh at. But when these things, medicine man is trained in the original way from an age of about 7 or 8 years old. They start learning this stuff, and they go through an apprenticeship for most of their lives until they're ready to go out on their own and do healing. So, not like today where you go to college, you're already in your 20s, and then you decide, I want to be a doctor. And so you go through another 12 years of schooling, and then now you can cut people open and do whatever, or take their brains out and bounce them around on the ground, and repair them that way. Who knows? I'm talking about
Yeah.
psychologists. Um, but the medicine man tradition is a long one. We're seeing now that medicine men that are training and they're in their late teens and 20s, they're finding out that they can't learn everything, so they become specialists. So if a medicine man would be considered a general practitioner, a modern medicine man that just gets a late start is actually taught what he knows and becomes an eye, nose, and throat specialist. So, with that said, um, scientists have said that man has only been here 30 to 35,000 years, and that's the extent. So, before that, apparently we were over in China and hadn't made it to the Bering Strait yet, according to the theories. And that eventually we made it across the Bering Strait, and 20,000 years ago, and started populating the country here. Well, we've always said, every single tribe has always said we've always been here. And uh, the scientists will tell you there's a big crater near where I live called Meteor Crater. It's between Flagstaff and Winslow, Arizona.
Mhm.
And this is an impact crater from a pretty large meteorite that hit there. And so it's the Starman movie was filmed there. So you can see in the movie how big that crater is. Um, the Navajos and the Hopis have stories about this impact. Now, according to scientists, this impact took place 50,000 years ago. So, it always amazes me how they just throw out these numbers. Oh, yeah, 50,000 years ago, this crater was impacted. Um, Natives should not have been around then. However, the Navajo have two different stories. Both of them kind of agree on the point that there were three holy people or three gods up in the cosmos that, because they live forever, they got tired of living forever and they decided that they're going to end it. So they threw themselves at the earth on a thunderbolt and they came down at night. And this is something that both the Hopi story and the Navajo story coincide with, is that this thing happened at night because everybody felt the earth shake and they heard a thunderclap. Um, the Navajos say that these three gods buried themselves at the bottom of the crater, and Navajos today are told you should not go there because to go there is to disturb the resting place of these gods, and that's not a good thing. So most Navajos that I know have don't go there at all. Now the Hopis have a very similar story that this impact occurred at night, and their story is that they had a settlement nearby toward Flagstaff, and when this thing impacted, it hit with such force that it completely leveled their structures at this place where they were building. So they had probably had room blocks there and a kiva and everything else. And we see some of that at Hamalavi outside of Winslow. But there were some other ones over toward Walnut Canyon. And because of the impact, the Hopis say that after that, they decided we will not build anywhere to the south anymore because this is a signal from the gods that maybe we shouldn't be there. So, based on these two stories that had been handed down over basically millennia, um, we are of the opinion that the dating is wrong. That man was here, and they witnessed or had this thing affected them in some way so strongly that this story has been carried for thousands of years and is still out there today.
So is it your estimate that the meteor impact was sort of 35, 50,000 years ago?
Well, according to science, uh, human population here has only been around for 30 to 30,000 years. 30 to 35,000 is what they say. And the meteor impact occurred 50,000 years ago. So there
Yeah.
shouldn't have been any witnesses to it.
But there were. That's the
There
irony.
were. That's what I'm
So,
saying.
so there were. They're saying that there were fully fledged cultures 50 plus thousand years ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I really think we have this idea today that we have so much technology. We can fly, we can get on our wristwatch and be like Dick Tracy and communicate. And we think we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I truly believe that we have lost so much technical information from the past that could help us today. And we've lost all this information. And I think that civilizations have grown, they become technological, and then they destroyed themselves over and over again. And we see some of this in the writings of India, where they're talking about nuclear weapons and flying machines. And in the Middle East, they found areas that had fused green glass after uncovering layers of civilizations,
Mm.
successive ones. And they said the only time we've ever seen fused green glass was at the atomic testing site in New Mexico after the atomic bomb was set off.
Was it Mohenjo-daro that they found the glassed over? There were a number of places where it was like something equivalent to nuclear weapons going off that caused the stone to be glassed over, like you're talking about.
Yeah, it's that's the only thing they know of so far that can create that effect.
Yeah.
And so, I really think that we've been flying before, we've been doing all these other things before. Um, we look at our little United States border, and we think there's a wall around us. I love it when everybody says America, America, America. Well, they're talking about South America, North America, and Central America. Uh, we are actually known as the United States of America. So, the Anasazi, the Fremont had trade routes all the way down into South America.
Mm-hmm.
And there's evidence that they were all the way over toward the Aztecs were over toward Florida.
Yep.
So, uh,
And
you
Georgia, they found the Georgia Aztec mounds.
right, right.
There was a
So,
tremendous stone trade, which included meteorites that came from the meteorite fields of the Mexico, high altitude deserts, where they would hunt the meteorites out in the open and trade them down all over the area.
yeah, and there is obsidian that was
Yep,
traded because it was used to make blades,
yep.
whether it was knives or arrowheads or whatever was. And the preferred blade was made out of a obsidian that had green material in it, and that was from Mexico. But we find it up here in ancient arrowheads. So
It's it's really interesting, Jonathan, that we're talking about the geological forms of these trade elements that were found by these ancient civilization. And another one that's really known to us today is shungite. Here's a piece of shungite.
Yep.
That was to be said that came from a meteorite. And this one particularly came from Russia. That was given to me as a gift. And what's really interesting about our lore and our superstitions with the Native Americans, there must have been a cataclysmic event as to the reasons why they didn't want to house there. There may have been it may have been considered a kill site where it may have killed animals and vegetation and may have destroyed certain elements so they weren't going to expand in a bad area. And it's really interesting, there's an aspect of spirituality to this. According to the Native American Pawnee, it was considered divine guidance from the gods in the sky that they were letting us know that they're still there. To some aspect, that it was a piece of traveling, is how we got here. It was a way for us to travel here to the world, and that the cosmic world is still sending our bloodlines here, as we are known as the star people. So it's really interesting, everything that's tied into the meteorite lore.
One thing that I see is that you look at the human race and you look, let's say, for example, yellow cake or uranium ore,
Hmm.
and you look at how that was utilized as a means to create, atomic weapons and the nuclear age and or atomic age. And but the Earth, if you look at the Earth and you look at all of the different minerals, and recently they discovered that cave down in Mexico that has the massive crystals that mankind
Hmm.
didn't even, you know, modern man wasn't even aware that that was there, and that was only discovered recently. So I think, just like John says, and I follow this with him too, is that I think in the past the human race has had these relationships with star people and people of other galaxies and other, through dimensional travel and things like this. The technologies were so far advanced of where we are today. I mean, just like John said, yeah, we have a digital watch or whatever, Apple iPhone, iPads, and we think we're at the very pinnacle of mankind's ability to utilize technology, but I don't see that. I think that in the past there were other civilizations, and some that we are probably not even aware of, that were utilizing technologies and communicating with other people from other galaxies, and we just have no idea. We man today has delusions of grandeur that we are it, and if you look within the universe, I think that I think the Earth and the Earth's atmosphere, we're like a grain of sand on a beach, you know, and we just don't know. I think it's much the life out there in the universe, and technologies are so far in advance of the human race. I mean, we're still committing war and atrocities with, you know, killing and rape and murder and all of these absurd things that, we haven't really advanced very far from the Neanderthals. So
Now we got the image up on the screen of the Mexican caves that we were talking about before. There's a person standing there.
yeah,
Okay, these
that's
are the mineral,
unbelievable.
mineral communities that have their own version of sentience that many cultures around
Right.
the world talk about. The mineral kingdom, the gem and jewelry kingdoms. They all have their own unique frequency. Some of these crystals, when you see that's a person there, those are like 3 to 4 meters round and 30 to 40 meters long.
John and I
Meters,
seen some
not feet.
rocks.
Meters, not feet.
John and I seen some rocks in a cave here in Arizona. It was like that as we went in there, but there were some that were cantilevered where you could actually, I mean, some as big as a mobile home that you could actually move with your arm. It was pretty hazardous and eye opening.
It would be interesting, Andrew, I saw the documentary on this one, and the amount of time that could be spent was not very long,
No,
No, it's so
yeah.
hot down there.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
really
I think it
hot.
was less than 15 minutes
Yeah,
in a containment suit.
exactly. And it would be interesting if it was something that we could, create to go down and stay longer and further explore the cave and see where it goes. It might be a path to an underground city or dwelling. I'm just putting it out there in that.
or a way to advance consciousness and create massive healing.
The
This
Yes,
was
sad thing
and
about
is
in the
that
ancient cultures, but
exactly.
the sad thing is that the human race and our governments would be trying to militarize it.
oh yeah,
They'd be trying to utilize it for weapons, and which, looking at that, I'm sure it could be weaponized, but that's what I would see would try to
or
come
or a
out of it.
playground for the elite, but they put a jacuzzi in to extend their life so they don't.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
only if you can pay the price.
Yeah,
I like this comment, as one of the audience is saying, is, as Graham Hancock says, we are a species with amnesia.
that's right.
And I
That's
really
true.
like, I love that comment, because I think, like what Jonathan was speaking to earlier, is we have forgotten the ways, and we have some of the language, we have some of the oral history and lore that comes from our ancestors, but without descriptions and what that looked like from an everyday life. We don't have diaries or anything depicting that. We have only conjectures of what we've been taught through accurate oral history that comes from, for example, I'm of the Pawnee Skidee clan, and very specifically, we really do believe, even into our modern day, that we are being visited. And in another show, I will talk about something that happened to me recently based on that lore and a direct connection. We still get connections. And even in our modern day way, it may not, because of all the science, we kind of speculate things. And
And
The
with
sad thing is that man doesn't learn from his mistakes. You look at what
right.
happened in Nazi Germany, and we're still repeating those kind of things over and over, and it leaves you wondering, what the hell? Don't doesn't the human race have any common sense anymore?
and isn't it in your petroglyphs you would be able to see some of your previous connections with star
Mhm.
people or with technology, I guess, would be one way that it is preserved.
True.
Also, the trade, the materials trade. Somebody was saying before about the trade between Teotihuacan and Spirit Mountain in Nevada is from the Chinook trade routes. We know that the trade routes went from the bottom of Argentina to all the way to the Cree Nations in Upper Canada. That somehow jade from China made it into the jade masks that were in the Mayan cultures. Jade
Right.
doesn't naturally exist here. You have serpentine or Californite, which is in the northern Mount Shasta area. Something like that is found. It's similar to jade, but it's not jade, but true jade being found here. So stones were an integral part of the cultural exchange systems, and it wasn't about money. It was about the power within each item that created a spirit link, a concept, or a religious artifact.
Yeah. So not only um, material objects like turquoise and things, but also information, the sharing of information. You look at the Fremont and you look at these spirals and these concentric circles. You can actually see some of those in other places around the globe, that were within some type of recorded rock
Yeah,
formation.
it's a common expression throughout many of the indigenous cultures.
So
And
how
for
did that
yeah,
similar information be exchanged?
Well, the way I see some of that is that Native Americans all across the United States, they each tribe spoke a different language or a different dialect,
Hmm.
and so they couldn't communicate directly with each other. I have a great grandmother on the Oklahoma side that actually spoke 6 or 7 different languages, including English, and so she spoke, like Kiowa, she spoke Comanche, she spoke Apache, she spoke, Cheyenne, and so you have this, but in order to communicate, you had what they call sign language and native sign language. The one everybody understands because we saw Graham Greene do it is, good trade, you know, and when he got a pair of sunglasses from Val Kilmer. So, that's about the only one that's out there that everyone knows. But there was a whole language that you could communicate with back in the day,
Right.
and that's lost. So we don't know exactly what that was. So information was still being exchanged all over the place. Goods were being exchanged. Uh, uh, we the Anasazi had domesticated, and the cliff dwellers had domesticated turkeys that were held in pens. I think they were waiting for Thanksgiving, but they had all kinds of stuff going on, and you look at this and you think these were not isolated. Um, the Navajo knew about the Fremont. The Fremont and the Utes called them Navajo, and in their language it means the people who till, because the Navajo were farmers, and the cliff dwellers became part of the Navajo. So we have some clans today, like Towering House Clan,
Mm-hmm.
the Kia'ani, which are descendants of the cliff dwellers. However, interestingly enough, there are no descendants of the Anasazi themselves. They
Right.
were they were completely wiped out. Um, so there's a whole undercurrent of history that's missing. Just like we don't. What do we do now? We don't even teach about slavery. Um, we our history is so one sided. Um, we don't even consider other things. Uh, there was everybody says, oh, the Holocaust, right? And Nazi Germany had this plan to eliminate all the imperfect people, the Jews, the Gypsies, everyone else that didn't meet their requirement for a perfect race. Guess who taught them that? The eugenics movements of the 1930s in the United States. And today we have our 4-H club that continues that legacy of breeding animals to get a perfect breed. That's what 4-H does. And even today on a small scale, we try to breed cats and dogs and try to come up with the perfect. And then we take them to dog shows and cat shows, and we pay thousands of dollars for them. But we came up with the eugenics movement. And we also said we need to get rid of undesirables. So they would go to insane asylums and they would sterilize people against their will so that they wouldn't progenate. And you see the same thing happening later on. And we said, oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. Nobody said, oh, we taught them that, so we should take some blame for it too.
Yeah, then they would lobotomize them too.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. And it was amazing. They didn't drill a hole in your head. They went in through the eyeball. Yep. Because the bone on the back of the eyeball is paper thin.
And that's when they started having large volume of people to experiment on. The age of experimentation. That's the unfortunate truth about what was done in those asylums back then.
Yeah. So, but getting back to our title, one of the things that I did want to mention is that in our Stan and I doing investigations in UFOs out here, a lot of them were seen to take off or to fly across the sky so fast that they look like a shooting star
Yep.
or a meteorite. And
Exactly.
I've had numerous people tell me that this craft was sitting there and all of a sudden, zip, it's gone. And to back up this point on the Skinwalker Ranch series, you notice that they're starting to use high-speed cameras that are capable of catching 1 million frames a second. And they're starting to see objects in the sky flying. And but we can't see them. They're so fast, and they could be overhead all the time. We just don't see them, and they don't displace air. So there's no breaking the sound barrier thunderclap. So when you talk about natives saying that star people that came riding on stars, it makes sense.
Well, and also weather can be a phenomena too, based on UFO sightings. And what was really interesting when I had an experience up in Uinta Basin with 14 other people, one of the things we saw was it was a cloudy day. Half of the clouds went away, and I really feel like these entities controlled that weather because they wanted to be known that they were there. And then watching their tic tac, out in the scientific world, is now called tic tac maneuvers. They were wanting us to see them maneuver. And what was really interesting, that was another way of communication to the people that were there. And we were all indigenous on that film crew that we were shooting the show. And what was really interesting is we had cameras. They let us take these photos, and some of them have been identified with their faces. I can't go into a lot of what the scientific backing of that is and the research that's been done, but there is being research done on those photos. And what was really interesting, that I got the impression of being a spiritual person, is they were trying to communicate to let them know that, they have feelings, and they were fun, and they were joking around. And we forget that aspect, that this may be the people that we have the same DNA, and they're just trying to reach out in a more advanced way with their technology, because we talk about lost technology. I don't think that technology's lost, uh, to them, but to us as a world, we're forgetting that aspect of our own spirituality and connection, because I think that's one of the ways communication occurs is through our spirituality and our consciousness, as spoken earlier. And so the Pawnees believed when these meteorites would show up, it was a sign of healing, that these star people wanted us to know that they're healing us, constantly healing the planet, whatever form that is. And the communication that was lost and obliterated, from our culture, there may have been something in the language that still kept that communication going with the universal power. So I
Yeah.
think that's one reason why it was obliterated and the knowledge taken away from us. And
Well, I
to
think science all too often across the board dismisses the spiritual element that you're talking about,
yeah.
automatically dismisses things related to the paranormal or supernatural.
Mm,
That's hocus pocus, and we don't look at that side of the coin, and they're missing out on a lot of information by approaching science in that way.
mhm,
John and I have seen things that where science would say, "Oh, that's not possible. That doesn't exist," and we've
right.
seen these things, firsthand. So it's sad.
Until you see your metaphorical kids doing donuts in the sky,
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
getting everyone to watch them. Okay,
or
what a better
or
way?
or we had a ceremonial dance, and this woman came up and she says, I've got, stage 4 cancer. They told me I only have 6 months to live, and I want a dance for me behind the staffs for healing. And so they did a dance for her. They're a series of 4, and she left. She was back the next year, and she says the doctors could not understand. They could not find any trace of cancer in her, and they didn't know how that happened. And she came back, and she was telling us, that thank you, and this thing works.
Right.
So, who's to say? The science tells us that we only use about 3 to 4% of our brains.
Yep.
And I think that's true.
Yeah.
Imagine if we were able to use 10% or 20% of our brains.
Yeah.
Where would this culture be? I believe it was the movie.
My poor Krell.
Yeah. Anyways, there's a movie that talked about what would actually happen if you were able to use 10% of your brain, 20% of your brain. And, at that point, by the time you're reaching 30.
Phenomenon.
Phenomenon. And then there
You
was
could
another
actually walk
movie
through walls. Yeah.
walk through walls and all that.
Mhm.
Vibrate through reality. Yeah.
Well, these extraterrestrials may be capable of using a percentage of their cerebral cortex to do these kind of things that we look at and say, oh my God, that's miraculous. They walk through a wall, as you said, or these kind of things. And, we have those type of abilities. It's just, we're so misdirected in a materialistic and even with some religions that want to control and manipulate and,
The thing is, we're not being taught that our body is actually technology, which is
True.
one thing. I've heard Andrew talks about our DNA skin suit, our body technology. I don't hear anyone else talking like that.
I don't either.
It is technology, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. DNA skin suit of experience.
Yeah.
Somebody
said that movie was Lucy.
Lucy,
yeah,
yes.
I saw that.
And
thank you for that.
Somebody also said that cave in Mexico was recently allowed to reflood, and it's been put back in its original state, I believe, back in 22. So, I'm a former what they call NSS member, National Speleo Society, and me and Stan have accompanied NSS members to map a cave over toward the Grand Canyon that went down 500 feet. In caving, it's even more rigid than hiking, where they say leave nothing but footprints. We tend to get into places and we don't realize that there's a cave in Arizona called Ketchner Caverns down near Tucson. And they actually put a hatch on the entrance, because when you go in there, you're wearing a face mask, but just the moisture is affecting from your condensation from breathing is having effects on that cave. And then we have to destroy things to make a path through there, and then that way people can walk through, like they did over at Carlsbad. So, we tend, everything we touch, we tend to kind of impact in some negative way.
Very true.
And we don't even have to try.
Well, they say they flooded that, but I would think that they probably fenced it off in some way. And like I said, if the governments, like the United States government, looked at that, their eyes lit up from a weaponized, standpoint. And because there's nothing else like that has been discovered in the world. And so
I think
I guess I'm very untrusting of governments.
I think there were several in Russia that were uncovered that they actually mined for the crystals themselves. They pulled them all out.
Wow.
But this was the first one that was left intact, I believe is
Yeah,
what it was.
and that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
We're just like that. But then if you dig down and find a whole bunch of gold, you're going to pull that out too,
Pull it out, exactly.
or gems or anything else.
You're not gonna tell anyone what you got. You're just gonna melt it down and turn it into cash.
Yeah, it gets convoluted. What's really interesting, a friend of mine owns a crystal shop up in near Idaho, and it was really interesting. She says, I want to show you something. And what she gave me was a piece of Lemurian crystals here. And I picked it up, and she says there's a lot of information in there, and I didn't quite understand what she was talking about. I know that crystals hold information, to the geological aspect of what the earth has done, but she said there's information that you need to know. When I put that crystal down on the counter, it vibrated when I walked away from it. And so she wouldn't let me walk out the store, and that was pretty costly. She gifted to me, but what was really interesting, she goes, I'm going to tell you right now, something's going to happen with you having that crystal in your presence. And sure enough, on that other show that we spoke about, when I was coming down the Columbia River, this is the thing that it was revealing, whether that was time travel or whatever. But what I'm saying is we have tools today on the earth that depict that. And, as we're speaking about meteors dropping in the earth, there might be actual things that are, information stored inside those crystals, that came from the universe.
Very true.
Mhm.
Medicine men use a lot of different types of crystal.
Okay.
Quartz crystal, we know even the smallest quartz crystal can store, a lot of information.
Mhm.
For me, I know firsthand. Here's a quick story. At one time I dated this one girl that had a quartz crystal, and we lived together. Later on, the relationship didn't survive. And later on, another girl I dated picked up that stone and said, the crystal, and said, oh, that's beautiful. Can I have this? And I didn't go back and think about the previous owner of that crystal. I said, yeah, sure. And she took it and kept it with her overnight. And she brought it back like the next day. And she said, oh my God, I don't want this. She says, it makes me think of, and she described this other girlfriend to it, to the smallest detail about that person. So I know that firsthand that these things can store a lot of memory. And we don't, as the human race, we probably can't even remotely fully understand the extent of what it can store. I mean, you look at uranium ore and how that can be manipulated to create, atomic weapons and stuff. But, crystals may be able to do the same kind of thing. But,
Many
interesting.
indigenous cultures around the world call crystals the record keepers. The stone people are the record keepers, similar to the Akashic record or the grand timeline of what's going on in the world. And then there are specific stones called Herkimer diamonds, which is a quartz crystal that's made under heavy, heavy pressure. They're only found in Herkimer, New York. And it's a crystal that's been under pressure that becomes a crystal inside 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 a crystal. And when you look at it, you can see the dimensions, and those are known as the neoclassic record keepers. Those are the ones that can go back to the ancient of days and bring back wisdom through the gazers of those types of stones.
I once seen a quartz crystal that actually had liquid on the inside of the crystal itself. I thought that
A lot of times you'll get some
very unique.
very unique inclusions in them.
I think about that Superman movie when he goes back to the caves up there in the, up in the north.
Fortress of Solitude.
Yeah, and then his whole family histories are on crystals, which
Crystal
is
data.
Right.
You think about the old school record player that had a crystal A quartz crystal needle
Stylus. Yeah.
stylus. Yeah,
Yep.
there's your Lemurian sound healing, your Atlantean sound healing energies, focusing on vibration through the tip of a crystal, going through the grooves of, creating a harmonic frequencies
Mm-hmm.
that converts into an amplification sound, a sound amplification system.
Crystal computing systems are being developed right now.
Yep.
They're not out, but they're being developed.
No.
That's why we can get terabytes of information now. Few terabytes is
So
because.
you can imagine
Mm-hmm.
that being developed, but if you can imagine utilizing one of these massive crystals that's bigger than,
Yeah. Stories that he can tell, it can tell.
Yeah, it would take a lot of smoking to clear that one.
Yep, I think a lot of smoking. Well, part of our title today is meteorites and satellites. We talked about earlier about some satellites. Are you guys familiar with the satellite called the Black Knight? That's been
Yeah.
around in
Yeah.
conspiracy world for a while.
Mm-hmm.
What you guys would like to talk about that?
Well, they've seen it. They found it. It's orbiting. We don't know what it is. It looks like in a certain profile. It looks like a person kind of standing there.
Like a moai from Easter Island, yes.
Right.
A
And
monolith.
yeah, and who's to say it isn't?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they don't go into a whole lot of detail on it. There's not a whole area of study about it, which doesn't surprise me. Um, there's a lot of anomalous things that we just kind of note, and we go, okay. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, and we go back to our daily lives. But it is anomalous, and I'd like to know. Would you like to know more?
Yes, would you like to know more? Like Starship Troopers.
Right.
Well, it kind of reminds me of that movie 2010. Kubrick's movies that are very famous, but in 2010 it depicts this monolith on a moon that has not even had any vegetation, and all of a sudden you can't be a part of this, stay away, blah 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 blah, and it creates a new planet. As the end shows that it has that information to a Genesis kind of type project. And so I wonder at times if we're being observed, or there's new formations of planets being made, planets without end kind of thing. So are we being observed by where we're at in our timelines? Are we being observed by a television sort of communication?
Well,
We don't know. We can keep speculating here.
I think that these other beings from other galaxies and other locations, I think they have the ability to, just like some insects on this planet are able to mimic leaves, and I think that extraterrestrial craft are capable of mimicking our own aircraft here on this planet, even the lights and stuff, even though they're actually UFOs. They'll mimic things that are found on this planet. I think kind of in a way as a camouflage or stealth, and things like this object could be the same kind of thing where it's actually extraterrestrial, but appears on, visually as simply some type of meteor or something of that nature.
Or some alien has a fat finger and turns off the cloaking device.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the
Exactly.
The Miami Ball
People
aliens.
from Earth.
Right.
Somebody actually turned off the cloaking device. Oh, they can see us.
Oops.
Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually you have to have a pair of glasses to see them. But
Yeah.
but one of the things that Stan said really stuck with me. This idea that somebody had a crystal that maintained the memories of somebody else. Um, what if you took that same line of thinking and these places where traumatic deaths occurred, where things happened, where people have died, those energies going into the crystalline structure of any nearby rocks could be held as a memory. And that could be where we're getting our hauntings and ghosts that we're seeing is a memory from something that happened a long time ago. And the logic is there. Um, it doesn't account for poltergeists that have volition to do things, but you have to do it. You do have to admit that some of the hauntings are almost like uh, a video that's played over and over and over again.
Interesting that you would say that, Jonathan. When I was up in the Uinta Basin on a particular ranch, haven't spoken much about this. I had a psychic with me, and it was a young man, and he went over to this huge rock and put his hands on it. And I said, "What are you doing?" I thought that was a little bit strange behavior. He goes, "You need to come and put your hands on this rock, and there's some information that needs to be told to you." And when I put my hand on that particular rock, in my mind, I could hear it, and it says, "I am a good rock. I haven't done anything wrong. Help me, help me, help me." And I thought, okay, this is really interesting. And I took my hands off in shock, and he says, "Do it again." So I put it back on, and there was one thing. He goes, "Could you please help me? I didn't do anything wrong." And he goes, "Help me, help me, help me." And that's what I kept hearing over and over. But then it told me, "I am a good rock. I am a good rock," And I thought that was really an interesting experience. I've never shared that before, but it
Well,
did occur.
some
Mhm.
tribes actually have the belief system that everything has a spirit to it,
Right.
even a rock. I mean, trees and plants and everything that's in our environment has a spirit to it, and that's why it's important to have respect for our environment, nature, and animals, and that all of these things have a spirit.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah, somebody asked a question, and I think it needs to be addressed. Somebody asked if it's okay to stare at the sun during the eclipse without glasses, and it just as a kid that used to do this, don't do it.
Yeah,
Don't do it at all.
don't
What
do it.
the way the eye is constructed, it focuses the light onto the back of the eye through the retina, and if you stare at the sun, it'll actually burn holes, just like you hold a magnifying glass up and burn ants, with it. It focuses those rays and can burn holes in the back of your eye,
Mhm.
and that'll cause macular degeneration or make your eyes go bad. Um, you
And
know,
don't be burning ants with magnifying glass either.
yeah, they're creatures too. Yeah,
Don't
but
don't don't be a Trump who looked at the sun without the glasses when he got elected in 2016.
When I was a young kid, we would take a shoebox and make a pinhole in it and make it so you could actually see the eclipse looking through the box, and it worked really effectively.
Well, interestingly enough, there are some nations that said we should not be outside when an eclipse is occurring.
yeah,
Navajo is one of them.
Navajos.
You're supposed to be inside the hogan. You're supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to sit and be reverent during that time and meditate and think about things. Yeah. You're not even supposed to be outside.
That's
What
right.
happens if you are outside in the belief?
Well, I think it
considered
lends to things like looking up at the sun and hurting your eyes. A lot of the teachings within Navajo culture, these belief systems are taboos. There is something behind each one of those lessons. Avoiding rattlesnakes and things like that. I mean, out in the heart of the Navajo reservation, if you were to get bit by a rattlesnake out there and there not being any way to treat you medically or anything, you know, a lot of these teachings are common sense kind of things meant to protect you.
Yeah,
It's
and
paying respect to the gods in
it's
Navajo lore. It's to pay respects that.
there's a lot of practicality. You know, people like to say, "Oh, there was no diabetes before." Well, that's American medicine. That when they keep their little record books, before contact with the Anglo, Navajos had a way to figure out if you had diabetes. They would tell the medicine man would tell you pee on this flat rock right here, and if the ants came to that rock, they knew you had their sugar in your blood and or in your urine and you had diabetes.
That's right.
You know, how elegant is that? So, you know, there's a lot of wisdom, but we don't see it today. You know, and you talk to old people. The first time I ever learned how to get my truck out of being stuck in the sand, an 80-year-old man came out with a little piece of wood about 3 feet long. And I was out there digging and digging and digging for like an hour. He must have just been laughing. And he came out with this little board and says, "Here, I'll get you out." And he stuck it under one of the wheels and he says, "Okay, back up." And I backed up a little way and then he stuck the board under something else. He just kept doing that and I was out in no time. So, you know, there's a lot of wisdom that's there that, you know, you have to look and take lessons and understand. A lot of our elders, they have Navajo names for constellations and stars. And in Navajo, they know the sky and they know of constellations that today take a telescope to see. So, you know, yeah, there's a lot of things that were said for a particular reason.
I find it interesting that any suggestions on how to prepare for a solar eclipse, fasting, revocations, fire ceremony, what part of life, individual, community focus. It's really interesting in the news today. They're telling us to prepare for the end of the world, as Andrew, you know, had mentioned earlier on. Get your food, get your water, you know, make sure that you're safe in your home. You know, whatever cataclysmic event is, making sure that you're prepared. And he's coming from a very spiritual aspect of it. Just do what you've been doing in your life and respect whatever your experiences are with the spiritual level of getting yourself ready for whatever you want to experience.
Well, a lot of times, man, you know, when fire rages or volcanoes happen or earthquakes happen and people are running around, "Oh my God, the world's ending and everything." This planet has been evolving and changing for millions of years, long before man ever stepped on this little blue marble. And we come along, we build our cities and skyscrapers and everything. And then when these things change and we're running around like ants, you know, wondering what the hell's going on. But if you use, like we said earlier, use some common sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
we're
out of,
living on a living planet, and
get out.
it evolves long after man is no longer on this planet. It'll still continue to evolve and change. Just use some common sense.
The best
Yeah,
thing you can
and
do during this time of the comet, the solar eclipse, is get out of fear and get
Yeah,
into a state of reverence for this world. See the positive, not the negative. I
learn
don't
from the
believe,
past.
yeah, I don't believe the world's going to end, but it's a good idea to always have 2 weeks of food stored, okay, and water. Everyone should
Yes,
have that every day,
yes.
okay.
you
As
might get a
for
big package. Yeah.
yeah, they think the New Madrid fault's going to go. That the last time the comet came was when the plagues hit Egypt, etc., etc., etc. Those are all conspiracy theories. And if something does happen, something happens. We'll deal with it then. We'll put on the news and eat popcorn. But until then, nothing's going to happen, and nothing's going to happen tomorrow. And there'll be the next prediction, and the next prediction, and the next prediction. But it's still a good idea to find reverence in the goodwill of those times, whether it's a fire ceremony, a cleansing of your land, or your own personal home. You're going to do something at a time where the energies between the many worlds is very thin. And it allows you to possibly connect to other places and spaces, or those places and spaces connect to you and can fill you with a reverence also, and allow that reverence to fuel your personal journey.
Well, John, I and Michelle have been on this journey to share with others, to know that these things that people call supernatural and paranormal, these things are real. They are as real as you and I sitting here talking to each other. A lot of times it's not right in our face every day, but it's there. And we hope that by us showing examples of what we've experienced, that you yourself will go out and educate yourself and learn the truth of our reality, of our universe, and better prepare yourself for tomorrow, you know?
My reality is different from your reality, from Jonathan's, from Stan's, from Andrew's, from Laura's reality. And each of us have our own realities that we all live in. And what we fear is usually the thing we don't want to deal with. And so fear happens to run our world today rather than look this as a celestial event. This is a phenomena of an astrological one. And these occur, yeah, maybe through time. Once again, we're talking about the timeline here, 130 years, since the last eclipse of this sort occurred. And so to predict, the end of the world, I mean, there's a documentary out that Nostradamus was not a seer and a revelator. He just wrote something down. And so people take some things out of context. And, it was really interesting. A conversation came up at dinner time with my son, and I saw the headlines. There will be a bloodbath if President Trump is not elected. So when I brought that up, my son went off politically on me, and he goes, well, wait a minute. I said, the headline said this. And you're listening to mass media who's telling you how to think. And he goes, if you had read the article, it had to do with the auto industry. So sometimes we can take context out of things that we're hearing, and that's where the fear gets instilled. So we've got to really get ourselves to a position where we're really studying these things, and whatever our belief systems is going to be our belief systems. And so
One
be at peace with yourself and your world.
one of the
Just
things that I can say is that if you look at history and time and events, everybody says end of the world. Our world is self-writing,
Mm-hmm.
and if you think about it in terms of, we're taught for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's like a pendulum that swings back and forth. Well, right now it's swinging one direction, and everybody's going doom and gloom. And then it'll get to a point where it'll start swinging back the other way. and eventually it'll center itself where it needs to be. So, that's how I view all of this. I don't get excited. I don't stockpile uh, stuff. I've got freeze dried food, but that's for taking in the field when we go on an investigation, along
Right,
with
right.
What's
little
the opposite of
chemicals. So,
what's the opposite of doom and gloom? Nothing's happening.
right,
So there
right.
is an equal and
Yeah.
opposite reaction of nothing happening. And I want to address this. There are a lot of people that enjoy the doom and gloom. They want the end of the world. They want a prediction to come through. And if you're one of those people, this is an opportunity for you to do some self reflection. You're meant to be living, breathing in your two legs, doing something in this world. Stop praying for the end of the world. Do something positive for yourself. Get out of fear. Create something that can make a change in your local community, or come up with some unique concept that can help people change their perspectives and point of view. It's why we do podcasts like this, because we all in our hearts want to help everyone.
The doom and gloom sells. It sells products,
Yeah, it
and
does.
and that it's in a lot of what you see today in the marketing. It sells, just like in the media, all of the blood and all of that stuff. That's what you see on CNN and these other media, because it sells. Car crashes and train wrecks and planes falling, it sells.
Well, Stan, for one of Andrew's shows, I wrote a doom and gloomer revocation, and it actually got the show banned from YouTube.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
things like that.
That's because it touched on all the things you're not allowed to say on YouTube.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to say. Yeah, true. Well, they're trying to ban TikTok right now, and
Yeah, true.
I think a lot of that's the same thing. That format allows people to freely express themselves, similar to what we're doing right here, right now, and share ideas around the globe in real time. And they
Yeah.
can't control that. Governments can't control that, and
Well,
and
they try.
media, and
The
so
big
Yeah,
thing
that's
is,
why they don't
and
want it.
you know how much we listen to the government and respect them. So, you know,
Don't want you guys monitored.
something
I'm,
on the TikTok subject. Facebook shot itself in the foot several hundred times and destroyed its own audience and destroyed its own platform. And the whole point of banning TikTok is to save Facebook. Because Facebook, if it doesn't do something significant to change it, it will not be around in 5 years. It'll be broken up into a bunch of small companies because it can't financially support itself anymore.
And then we're going to go to dream states. There's a show I'd love to do on dream states. There's a movie out that depicts that. I think it was Nicolas Cage's new movie that he came out, and they built technology around his dreams, dreaming. And what they're doing is they're advertising, and they said this will be the next level away from Facebook. Really interesting movie.
Well, what's it called?
I think it's called Dream States.
Dream State.
I think so. Nicolas Cage. It's a brand new
Nicholas Cage.
movie, yeah.
Mhm.
But it talks about that, the obliteration through advertising through dreams. They're only allowed to go into somebody's dream and sell merch.
well, like we said, we don't use very much of our brains. And I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just say it for what it is.
True.
And
True.
we are missing a lot of our spiritual backgrounds,
Yes.
and that is for Native Americans. We grew up in a spiritual community, and so we're attached to that, and it becomes part of you. And other people look at us, and they look at us and they say, well, we want that. I want to buy it. I want to possess it.
Right.
And this is a journey of self.
Exactly.
You have to decide if you're going to go on that journey and explore this, or you can sit back and collect things and be like everybody tells you you should be. And but we all have that spiritual yearning, and there are gifts. And I'll tell you up front, I used to sit in church and I'd hear this preacher talking about gifts, and he always talked about wisdom, and I says, oh man, I want wisdom, I want to be wise. Well, tell you the truth, I had no idea that all the mistakes you have to make and learn from them in order to obtain wisdom. And if I had it to do again, I wouldn't ask for that, because I made a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah.
And I was able to learn from them. And now I can look back and say, oh, gee, I shouldn't do that because there's an effect. So now, I like to tell people I'm a wise guy, eh? Uh,
Yeah, but look at all the wisdom you earned through those mistakes. So you
yeah,
got your wish.
yeah.
You got it
it was a
then.
journey that maybe it is daunting if I had known about it ahead of time.
Yeah.
I
So
think
I
you
would.
had experiences. I don't think they were mistakes. I think they were experiences. I think we're self-judging of ourselves so hard that we look at it as a mistake. It maybe didn't feel comfortable when the
I'm
outcome
a
came in.
law enforcement officer. We see everything in black and white.
Right.
So I
True.
want to make a quick statement. The
Sure.
8th is on a Monday. If it's the end of the world, we'll all get together and do a show. How does that sound? If not, it goes on, and you'll see us next Wednesday.
In the spirit realm.
That's
A
right.
special,
Right.
a special show.
Special announcement. We're hedging our bets. If there is something, we'll do a special end of the world show. We'll get everyone on all at once, and we'll talk all about the end of the world. I doubt it will happen. I think it's less than a 0.000000001% chance that anything significant will happen, except for maybe politically wise. Nothing is going to really happen. If it was meant to happen, we'd have had our disasters long ago. That's the way I see it.
It might happen midnight that night.
Yeah. Nothing happening is the opposite of the pendulum.
1201.
But be ready, because in the year 2000, when everybody was doing the Y2K thing,
Oh yeah.
everybody was hoarding, and
Yeah.
you can buy toilet paper, all that kind of stuff. And my department was still handwriting reports. And it was actually in our general orders, you had to handwrite them. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs had 20 computers that they did not utilize, that were not given to other agencies in case the computers died. And so they asked us, do you want any computers? And I said, we'll take all 20 of them. So my department took a major leap and got into the working with computers.
Computer
as
aids.
a Y2K. So keep an eye on those auction sites and stuff like that, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of good stuff that's going to be let go when the disaster doesn't take place.
I have a prediction. A whole bunch of underground bunkers will be for sale on the 9th of April.
Well, they can deliver them to Oklahoma where we had tornado warnings.
A whole bunch of underground bunkers are going to be for sale when nothing happens on the 8th. All right, guys, let's call it an end to the show. This has been spectacular.
Thank you to everybody that commented. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
We want everyone to please head on to the Paranormal Rangers website, sign up, give an email there so you get all the new updates of everything that's going on. We're still featuring the training seminar that's going to be in York in June. All the information is there on the website. Now, any last words? Anybody want to say any last words before we go?
Try not to get hit by a meteor.
Yeah, try not to get hit by a meteor.
Or a satellite.
And they're going to keep coming down every day.
That's right.
And if you do get hit, we're going to interview you.
Yeah, they call that a retrograde orbit,
Yep.
The satellites don't stay up there. They just keep falling, and that's why they keep putting Starlink keeps putting so many of them up there.
That's right.
Believe me, there's a lot of junk up there.
Oh, yes. All righty, everybody. We'll be back next Wednesday for another Native Paranormal Crossroads. All right, Jill, take us
Bye.
away.
Thank you.